Good morning, everyone. Let's begin with the word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, we are thankful, Lord, for this new day, this new week, and for the opportunity to once again study your word together. I'm thankful that Angela's here, and we just ask for your continued healing upon her. And we pray, Lord, that your Holy Spirit can speak to our hearts as we study together. We know there's many things on our minds, difficulties that exist around us, people that we love and care for who are hurting and suffering. And we know, Lord, that you've given us an opportunity to hear your voice speaking to us, that we can obey your voice, and that we can bless those around us. So guide in this study, and thank you for your continued presence and leading. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Okay, so it's an unusual situation having 4 screens in front of me now. I think I used to do it this way, but I haven't for a while. So yeah, hopefully the other computer keeps going, but my main computer here, my laptop, should keep us, even if the other computer shuts down. It's just that the screen will stop sharing, share from the other computer or something like that. I'm gonna do this here. So anyway, we've been studying the chronology of the decrees. And after we had gone through the chronology of the last 7 kings of Judah, understanding the 2520, now Stephen did a presentation on Sabbath, which was rather interesting in that he used this phrase, what was it? Program? No. What was the phrase from the 2520 project? Project 2025, and he created this inversion of that to be Project 2520, dealing with Daniel chapter 9 and the 70 weeks and how that relates to Leviticus 26 and the different periods of time that we get from Daniel chapter 10, dealing with the 2520 there. So anyway, for those that haven't seen his study, you can see it on my YouTube page. Now, it's a little bit mathy, not that I'm not mathy, but with Stephen, he did recognize what we had said about Ezra chapter 1 and Daniel chapter 1, verse 21 and Daniel chapter 10, and that Daniel's consistent in saying the first year of Cyrus as being when Babylon falls, and then the third year being in the spring of 536. And he looked at some of the way that the pioneers had understood it, or different commentators had understood the third year of Cyrus. Now, and I think our solution, which wasn't the original solution that I had always taken that Daniel was inconsistent, that he was referring to 2 different ways of counting Cyrus's reign. But once I noticed that, it seemed to make a lot more sense. So in Ezra, he's going to call what Daniel calls the third year of Cyrus, he's going to call it the first year. So this is in the first year of Cyrus. That is, this is in 536 that we see this rebuilding of the altar. And then once the altar is rebuilt, then you're going to have, it's going to be, how many days was it? Well, it's 392 days after the end of Daniel's prayer in Daniel chapter 10. So if you go from April 24th, and I think I have this up here. Yep, so I got this up here. I'll just switch this quickly in the screen. So we have April 23rd. So it's the 24th day of Nisan, which happens to be April 23rd in 536 BC. And then they're going to set up this altar 154 days later. Now, the significance of that is if we do the inclusive count from Samuel Snow's first letter when he wrote it to the publishing of his last letter on July 18th, so from February 16th, 1844 to July 18th, 1844, is 153 inclusive days, or 154 inclusive days, just 153 cardinal days. And if you remember, I had counted using February 16th, that is a symbol of two months and 16 days. to count to the center of that chiasm. So I counted 2 months and 16 days from February 16th, and that brought me to May 2nd, which is the center of the chiasm, which is the Passover letter that's published in the Midnight Cry on May 2nd. We don't know when it was written, but that ends up being the center of the chiasm because you have another 2 months and 16 days from May 2nd to July 18th. So you just go May, June, July, 2, and then you count 16 days from the 2nd, brings you to the 18th. And so that ends up being 153 days, 154 inclusive. 154 is 2 times 77, and the 153 ties us back to the 153 fishes, plus the 153 days that William Miller adds onto Ussher's chronology. So Miller has the creation of the world in 4157 BC instead of 4004 BC like Ussher. And of course, Miller makes mistakes there on how he does it, because he lengthens the period of the judges and does some other things to get that period of time. And it's one of the evidences that it's actually the first evidence that Snow uses for 1850 or 1843 or 1844 as being, the 6,000 years, right? But anyway, there's a whole bunch of other things related to that. So the fact that you have that from the decree to the building of the altar is pretty significant. Now, when we look at the Babylonian date of the second day, the second month, you can see that the Babylonian date, second day, second month, now I would assume that they're going to actually use the biblical date. So the biblical date would not be May 19th. It would be like on our calendar, Julian calendar, right? Because you can see that's the first day of the second month. So if you go to the second day of the second month, that ends up being May 20th, and it's the third day of the second month. The thing that this gives us, though, is 391 and a half. If you kind of go between those two dates, you get the half. So from the issuing of the decree to the building, laying down of the foundation of the temple, it's 391 days or 392, but we can see how it would fit in with 391 and a half, right? Does that make sense to people? And I think it's pretty significant myself that we have that symbol, those symbols in this. And then we have, of course, 237 days to the 19th. So 237 has the 27th day of the third month digits as well. So the March 27th symbol. But the main thing is that 391 and the 154. I think those are pretty significant. Any comments about that? So no comments? Okay, I'll go back here. So they set up the altar. Second year of their coming into the house of God in Jerusalem in the second month began Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, the son of Joseph, right? So we got the second year. So we have 2, second month, 2, second day, right? Where's the second day here? I think maybe that's in the next chapter. No, where did it say the second day of this, the second month? The whole story about them being disappointed. We read what Ellen White said. Second year, second month.
Yeah, the 6th verse, right? No.
6th verse? No, that's going to be the first day of the 7th month.
I thought I saw it, though. Second year of...
It says second year, second month, but it's also supposed to be the second day, at least. I'll find it. Oh, I won't find it here. Maybe it's the second day is mentioned in, I'm pretty sure it said the second day, I thought. It's not in, let me see here. No, okay, that's in Second Chronicles. Okay, in Second Chronicles, when Solomon builds his temple, he began to build on the second day of the second month in the 4th year of his reign. So maybe I just read that into my mind. I saw the second year and I was thinking second day, right? So maybe it's the first day because, and that would, again, bring us to the Babylonian 391, right? So that'd be May 19th. So Ezra chapter 3, I mentioned. Okay, so again, the second year of their coming into the house of God in Jerusalem, in the second month began Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Yeshua, the son of Joseph. So it doesn't say the second day. Okay, but I must do something about this. So just searching for this here. So if it's the first day of the second month, then it is 391 days. But I thought there was some way in which we determined it was the second day as well. Okay. Okay, so here's some, this is what AI says. Because Ezra does not specify a date, but highlights the exact same month, the logical and historical deduction is that Zerubbabel deliberately mirrored Solomon and laid the foundation of the second temple on the exact same anniversary that the first temple was begun, the second day of the second month. Okay, so we don't know that for certain. Okay, now how many years is that going to be from, because we're going to have the foundation of Solomon's temple laid in 1013 BC. So we could figure out this exactly. Let me see here. So I'm going to 1013 BC, second day of the second month. Okay. So that's going to be between these two, 174,585 days if it's on the 20th of May. So that's May 24th. That's going to be 5,912 months exactly. And okay, well, it ends up being like if we did it as Islamic years, it's 42.26 or 267 Islamic years. So if we divided that number of months, 5,912 by 12, you end up with 492 years, Islamic years. So what did I do wrong here? Oh, I see what I did. Okay, yeah, so that, 492. So 174 now is the number of years, of course. In ours, it's going to be 478 years, right? Actual years, which is interesting. Okay, so we got that span of time from the two laying of the foundations of the temple, 478. So now we know from the dedications there's 490 years plus 7 months. Okay, 478. Obviously, that's 12 years difference, 12 years short of 490. See that. Think about that a bit. Okay. Now, as far as does anyone else, so other people draw the same conclusion, that it's on the second day of the second month. They say because Ezra 3:8 specifies the month but omits the day, researchers and timeline scholars frequently look at the historical precedent to fill the gap. You'll relay the two texts and conclude the timing was not coincidental. So so you could just say it's deliberate on the part of the exiles to do that, so that they're going to take the second day. So whether it's the first day or the second day, we don't know for certain. But definitely if they say it's the second month, it's definitely at the beginning of the month, either the first day or the second day. So again, that preserves the 391.5 as a symbol. So this is what other people say as well. They just say it's probably the second day of the second month. Okay. Yeah, and the fact that they waited to the second month, I mean, it could be just logistics of doing that. But so any other thought about the laying of the foundation of the temple? Because now we're going to move to the adversaries. Okay, we're satisfied with that chronology there? I know some of this stuff I'm going to have to draw out as diagrams, which I didn't do. I could have had time to do it. Not much, but ended up having somebody come and visit yesterday. Let me think here. So yeah. So in my timeline charts, my PDF PowerPoint, I'll end up drawing a diagram of this chronology. One is I want to have a diagram dealing with the first temple, the time from the first temple to the second, plus with the laying of the foundation and the different events that happen. So, Cyrus's decree, the laying of the foundation, setting up of the altar, the laying of the foundation, and then the delay and ultimately having this meetings being transcribed. Not sure what that means. I got 3 mice here, mouses or whatever they call them, to work with now. That's the wrong one. So anyway, I'll get that drawing done maybe for tomorrow. Okay, so we have the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin heard that the children of the captivity builded the temple unto the Lord God of Israel. Now we're going to go through the logistics of this. We've gone through it before, dealing with Haggai and Zechariah, but we're going to look at that and just, reaffirm what we had established before. Then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said unto them, Let us build with you, for we seek your God as ye do. And we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Ashur, which brought us up hither. Okay, so Esarhaddon, the king of Assyria, is going to repopulate the land. Now, we know this, of course, this is in the time of Esarhaddon. Esarhaddon is going to be the one who takes Manasseh captive. The repopulating of the land would be in connection with that history. He has that period of time, whatever it is, 11 years or something. Can't remember how many years. I think it's less than one. I think it's 8 or 9 years that he's king. So we'll look at that a little bit as well. Just kind of make sure we got that chronology correct. But these are the people that later are become the Samaritans. Now, we've looked into the Samaritans before, so we understand that the Samaritans are mixed with the remnant of the people of the land. Now, when we look at the history of Israel in modern times, who are the Samaritans today? Have you ever thought about that?
Would it be the Palestinians?
Okay, so, and see, this is where, we start to get into some of these political things that people talk about. Right now there's this really popular movement where everybody hates Israel. They're the oppressors. They're these evil Zionists who are trying to commit genocide against the Palestinians. Now, I know it's not a really simple answer to this, but so today, here I'm just reading here, the Samaritans are a highly distinct insular ethno-religious group. They maintain that they are genuine direct descendants of the northern Israelite tribes, specifically tracing their lineage back to Joseph, right? They nearly had a demographic collapse. They had 1 million during late antiquity, centuries of Byzantine oppression, Islamic conquest, forced conversions, and massacres effectively decimated the group. By the year 1918, the global Samaritan population had collapsed to just 146 people. So today they number approximately 800 to 1,000 people. The community is split almost perfectly in half between two primary settlements. Kiryat Luza, located on Mount Gerizim in the West Bank, and the city of Holon, situated just south of Tel Aviv in Israel. They navigate their unique geographical placement by speaking both modern Israeli Hebrew and Arabic. So they have they don't really marry outside of their religion, so it limits their growth. Okay, so they're not the Palestinians. Now, who are the Palestinians? Now, we often, connect the name Palestinians to the Philistines, right? But that's sort of through the Roman naming the area Palestine, if I understand correctly. So when we think about these different ethnic groups, it's not always as clear cut as people sort of make it out to be. So in the Bible, when they talk about the Philistines, it actually can refer to different groups of people, because the Philistines in the time, when they're mentioned in Genesis, are not the same group of people later on in the book of Judges, correct? We understand that?
I would agree.
Yeah. Now, my understanding here, and being confirmed by what I'm searching on here, is that there is no particular group of people that ethnically are Palestinians, right? So they come from lots of different places, Africa, Asia, Europe. And so there is no particular group. Some may be connected to some of the early Canaanites, roughly, but basically that doesn't really exist. And of course, with Islam and the Arabs, you basically have had that happen. Now, also, when it comes to the Semitic peoples, now, what groups are descended from Shem? We know the Jews are, right? And that's where we get the word Semite or Semitic. It comes from Shem. But this would also be true of the people of Arabia, at least some of them, right? Through Ishmael. Right?
Some possibly, yeah.
Yeah. Though there was definitely a lot of racial intermingling. Because I had this discussion with somebody regarding the Jews, because Jesus, he's depicted as a white man, which I don't actually see him. It depends on the paintings, but I see him usually as kind of a bit brown skinned in the ones I grew up with. But Jews do not necessarily look like the Jews that were in the land of Israel, because you have the European Jews, and you could argue, well, they mixed with other races, but it doesn't seem that they did much mixing with other races when they were in Europe. Obviously, some of that happened, but also other racial mixes occurred as well. So in the time of Christ, what a Jew looked like wouldn't necessarily, it could be a bit more variety than, or just as much variety as we see today in the land of Israel. But, you have some people, they want, Jesus to be black. Some want to, have really dark skin, but we don't know exactly what he looked like. But anyway, this is sort of an aside. It's just that when we deal with this history here in Ezra, we know that what we have is racial mixing. That is, the Samaritans, the one who were brought into the land of northern Israel by Esarhaddon, are going to mix with some of the people of the land, whether they be Israelites or even maybe Canaanites that were left in the land. So there's going to be this mixing. Now, in this time here, so we're looking at from 677, to 536. So you're looking at roughly 240 years that these people have been here at that time. Now, by the time of Christ, they're going to have been there a lot longer, and they've developed as a people. But here at this time, they want to participate in the building of the temple. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto the Lord our God of Israel, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, hath commanded us. Right? Now, why do they not want the Samaritans to help them? Because what's happened to Israel in the past? They've had alliances with the other nations around them, and that's influenced them into false worship, right? Now, these people say they want to worship the true God. Is their worship correct? Does this parallel any history with Adventists and Protestants or anything like that? Any thoughts about it? No thoughts?
Well, wouldn't the Samaritans a mixed race?
Yeah. So they're mixed with some of the northern Israelites, and we know that northern Israel, that southern Israel, Judah, was not really happy with them. We saw that in dealing with the prophecies in Ezekiel, right? They considered them apostates, but that they were somehow preserved from destruction, even though northern Israel was destroyed. They weren't going to be destroyed because Jerusalem was a cauldron. Of course, it's going to become a cauldron in a bad way when they're finally destroyed. But yeah, they're mixed, so it's repopulated from people from other lands. Now, what in the ancient Near East, the religions of the ancient Near East, they believed in local gods, right? So when people were taken from their nations and brought to the land of Israel, their belief was they need to worship the gods of that land, right? That's why they are worshiping, Jehovah, except that they have mixed ideas from their previous religions, right? So it's not a pure religion, right? You would agree there, William? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's spiritual. It's a spiritual mixing of error and truth, right?
Yeah. So I think that there are parallels to Adventist history. So Angela put 2 Kings 17, verse 24. So that's the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Katah and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria in the stead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. right? So that's just exactly what they're saying there in Ezra chapter 4. We were brought here by Esarhaddon. Now it says here this is the king of Assyria, right? So if we look at this chapter in the context here, because we studied this in detail, yeah. So this is this exile. So this is all going to be connected to, like, I don't think it mentions Esarhaddon by name here. It says here, well, if we keep going on, right, reading this. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations which thou hast removed and placed in the city of Samaria know not the manner of the God of the land. Therefore he hath sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land. Right? So this is what I was talking about. They believe there is a God of the land that they need to obey. Then one of the priests whom they had carried away from Samaria came and dwelt in Bethel and taught them how they should fear the Lord, right? Howbeit every nation made gods of their own and put them in the houses of the high places which the Samaritans had made, every nation in their cities wherein they dwelt. And the men of Babylon made Succoth Benoth, and the men of Cuth made Nergal, and the men of Hamath made Ashima, and the Avites made Nibhaz and Tartak, and the Sepharvites burnt their children in fire to Adramelech and Anamelech, the gods of Sepharvaim. Adramelech, splendor, Syrian idol, and Namelech, Syrian deity of some sort. Okay. So they feared the Lord and made unto themselves the lowest of them priests of the high places, which sacrificed for them in the houses of the high places. They feared the Lord and served their own gods after the manner of the nations whom they had carried away from thence. Unto this day they do not after the former manners. They fear not the Lord, neither do they after their statutes or their ordinances, or after the law and the commandment which the Lord commanded the children of Jacob, whom he named Israel, with whom the Lord had made covenant and charged them, saying, ye shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourselves to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. Right? So they first are not worshiping the God of the land, then they are taught and instructed, of course, by somebody from Samaria, and then they mix the two religions together. Okay. Yeah, so there's a message given, right, regarding this. But the Lord who brought you up from the land of Egypt with great power and stretched out arm, him shall ye fear, and him shall ye worship, and him shall ye do sacrifice, and the statutes and the ordinances and the law and the commandment which he wrote for you, ye shall observe to do forevermore, and ye shall not fear other gods. And the covenant that I have made with you ye shall not forget, neither shall ye fear other gods. But the Lord your God, ye shall fear, and he shall deliver you out of the hand of all your enemies. Howbeit they did not hearken, but they did after their former manner. So these nations fear the Lord and serve their graven images, both their children and their children's children, as the day their fathers did. Of their fathers, so do they unto this day. Now we can see this is in the time, right, dealing with the taking away of and the destruction of Samaria, right? So this is 2 Kings chapter 17, right? That's going to deal with Hoshea, the last king of Israel. So we can see that that's all mentioned in connection with the fall of Israel, right? Now, chapter 18 is going to go back and go over that history again from the king of Judah's perspective, right? But we can see that that's going to happen based on Ezra chapter 4 in the time of Esarhaddon. If you just read it there, you might think that they repopulated the land right after they destroyed Samaria. But it seems that this actually happens in the time of Esarhaddon. They just call him the king of Assyria, right? But here, we see specifically who it was that repopulated the land. Okay, so thanks for that reference there, Angela, to look at that. Okay, yeah, a lot of things here. So we have these adversaries, and of course they don't want to be influenced by these false religions. Now this is going to cause the people of the land to weaken the hands of the people of Judah and they troubled them in building, and they hired counselors against them to frustrate their purpose all the days of Cyrus king of Persia, even unto the reign of Darius king of Persia. Now we know in Stephen, I believe, mentioned this yesterday. But when we look at Darius, king of Persia, we see that there's this opposition that's going to occur during that time, right? So from the time of Cyrus to the time of Darius, they're going to have this opposition until the temple its construction is finished. So they're going to try to hinder the construction of the temple during that time. Now, then it says here, and in the reign of Ahasuerus, in the beginning of his reign, wrote they unto him an accusation against the inhabitants of Judah. Now, and Jerusalem. Okay, I left of Jerusalem. Didn't finish reading the sentence. Now, this Ahasuerus is who? It's not Xerxes.
Would be Artaxerxes.
Nope, it's not Artaxerxes. This is false Smyrtus.
Okay.
Or no, pardon me, this is Cambyses. Right?
Cambyses.
Yeah. Now, remember that Darius the Mede, his father is referred to in Daniel chapter 9 as Ahasuerus, right? This is actually a title, right? So when they have these names of these kings, like Xerxes, they don't call him Xerxes, they call him Ahasuerus, the same as as Cambyses is called Ahasuerus. So this is more a type of title rather than specifically a name. And that has led to confusion. Now, the way some people read this, because I've had arguments with Adventists, it didn't come to fisticuffs or anything because it was over the internet, but it might have on their part if with the way that they were so angry at me, because they took the position, that this is Cyrus to Darius. And so then they say, well, after Darius is Ahasuerus. And then after Ahasuerus is Artaxerxes. So in chapter 4, verse 7, it says, in the days of Artaxerxes wrote Bishlam and Mithridath, Tabeel, and the rest of their companions unto Artaxerxes, king of Persia. And so they're going to talk about this. Now that's going to be false Smyrtus. But because they don't understand that the temple was completed in under Darius's decree in 515. So what they do is they say you have Cyrus to Darius, then you have Ahasuerus, which would be the one in the book of Esther, and then you're going to have Artaxerxes, the one who issues the decree in 457. And then they're going to follow along when it talks about this other Darius who completes the temple. They're going to say that that's the Darius that followed Artaxerxes, because there is another Darius after Darius the Great. And they're going to put the building of the temple as completed in 408 BC. So they're going to have the temple completed at the end of the period of 49 years, the first 7 weeks. And you can see that there's kind of a logic to it, right? In that if you not looking at any history or any documentation, and you're just looking at the names as they're presented in the book of Ezra, that you're going to create this completely different chronology and a completely different time that the temple is built. So they want to have the temple built under Artaxerxes' decree. And so I looked at that, right? So initially, I looked at everything. So I looked at this problem, but it was pretty clear from the spirit of prophecy, because she's going to name who Ahasuerus is and who Artaxerxes is in these verses. That is verse 7 and 8, right? Or 6 and 7, right? So she's gonna tell us who these are. Now, these other Adventists, though, they were original book people, right? So the book Prophets and Kings does not count, right? So Ellen White's statements there, they could just brush aside. But you can see how people can build a whole system with a little bit of knowledge, and it does sort of hold water on its own, right? It appears sort of sound if you're just doing your first look at it, right? So I understand the thinking, but the fact that I disagreed with him did not sit well with this guy. He was, at least, as much as you can read a person's emotional state from social media, it definitely I think it would be pretty easy to see that his emotional state was not stable. But he was an Adventist, right? And he was trying to, support the common idea that many Adventists have, is that the temple's built under Artaxerxes' decree. So we're going to look at that. And so we don't just want to brush it aside. We want to look at the argument and even the idea, Ellen White she was alive when, Prophets and Kings was published, but they just try to argue that that wasn't her own words. Somebody put that in there.
Excuse me?
What's that?
You said that Ellen White was alive when Prophets and Kings was published?
Okay, she wasn't alive when Prophets and Kings was published, when it was written.
Okay, there's a difference.
What's your story on Prophets and Kings? She was involved in Prophets and Kings.
But a lot of Prophets and Kings came from edited documents that they used to put this together to finish the book.
Right. Okay. So what are you trying to say about it? So when was it published? Was it published after her death?
Yes, 2 years after her death.
Okay, so 2 years. So in 1916?
1917.
17. Okay. Okay. So that's why they don't accept it then.
Yes.
Okay. So when we're going to look at, okay. Yeah, that I didn't know. I didn't know. I thought she had written it.
No.
But you're saying that she didn't actually write it.
Correct.
So it's a manufactured book. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So that explains why they don't accept it then. Okay. So would these words have been put into her mouth? Like, she's going to say things in that, like that there's, more than 20 years between Cyrus's decree and Darius's decree, but less than 20 years between when they returned to the land and Darius's decree, which is something no one else says, right? So it's not something she got from anyone else.
Okay.
So how would we piece this together with Prophets and Kings?
Well, this goes back to why I'm being adamant about using the source documents.
Okay.
I look for quotes from items that she has written instead of going to a book like Prophets and Kings. Of the three books that I've had the most, shall I say, intestinal distress over, Prophets and Kings, Adventist Home, and Child Guidance, because they basically are compilations.
Okay. So you're saying Prophets and Kings. So yeah, so it would be taken from articles. So you're saying that it could be manipulated.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's why what I do is I take specific quotes and I look for the original source documents.
Yeah.
Because
right. Okay.
They're going to be written by her.
Yeah. So the original for false Smyrtus statement is from manuscript 116, 1897.
Okay.
So she says the Samaritans tried to hinder this work by their false reports. They aroused suspicion in minds that easily stirred up to suspect and minds to suspect. I see what she's saying. And because of this discouragement, the Jews became unbelieving and indifferent in regard to the work that the Lord had signified he would have done. They were opposed by Smyrtus, the usurper. Then ceased the work of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. So it ceased until the 2nd year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. When Darius came to the throne, he set aside the work and the prohibition of the usurper. But even then, the people that should have been most interested continued to be indifferent. They misapplied the prophecy given by inspiration. They misinterpreted the word of God and declared that the time to build had not yet come, and that until the days were fully accomplished, they would not undertake the work. But while they left the building of the house of the Lord, the temple in which they could worship God, until the end of the time specified, as the captivity of Jews had fully come, they built mansions for themselves. So one of the things we see is when we studied Haggai and Zechariah is that in dealing with this second decree, so false Smyrtus is going to stop the rebuilding of the temple. And then in 622, we're going to have Darius come to the throne. Now, it's not going to be immediate that he's going to issue a decree, right? So everybody puts his decree in 622 for some reason. Even though Haggai and Zechariah begin prophesying in 622, it's not readily evident that they commence rebuilding right away, right? Is that what we could see? That there's this hesitancy, which Ellen White is supporting. So it's going to take time for them to commence rebuilding the temple. And then the enemies are going to come and oppose them again under the time of Darius.
Right.
Right? And then under Darius, he's going to look for this decree, right? And that's going to take time. So first, they're going to start building under the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah, which takes a bit of time. They don't just immediately, start rebuilding. And then it takes time for the enemies to start opposing it. And they have to send, an official complaint to Persia. And then they're going to spend time looking for this original decree of Cyrus. Now, they also look for this during the reign of false Smyrtus. But false Smyrtus, what he finds is the Babylonian Chronicles. And he sees that they were, a naughty nation, right? They're going to be this troublesome nation. So he's not going to try to find the original decree of Cyrus. But one is he's not really concerned about the laws of the Medes and the Persians, right? In the same way that Darius is. So Darius Hystaspes, when he looks for this decree, he thoroughly looks for it till he finds it. And then he issues another decree, which is then going to complete the building of the temple, which is going to take about another 7 months. So all of this history we've looked at before. But now, yeah, so when it comes to prophets and kings, like I have looked at the original articles. Now, most of these articles were written in the 1890s. So Prophets and Kings was written in the 1890s, but it's not published as a book until after Ellen White's death, you're saying.
It's not that I'm saying it, it's the fact.
Yeah, but that's what you're saying is that, but you agree that it was written by Ellen White prior to, because almost all of it is from the 1890s. There's some from the early 1900s, but she seemed to be writing this history down in articles in the Review and Herald. So it just wasn't put into a book at that point, right, while she was alive, right? Have you looked into this in any kind of detail?
I have looked into it as I have examined specific situations.
Okay.
So,
because one of the things about it, about Prophets and Kings, is you can almost read into what she's writing into Adventist history. That is, she seems to be writing this history as a warning to the Adventist church.
right.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So I somehow forgot that it was published after her death. I'm not sure how I forgot that. But anyway, that's their argument. But we can trace this statement regarding false Smyrtus, and we can also find the statement regarding Cambyses, and we can also find the statement regarding about when the temple is completed. These statements are all in her Review and Herald articles. So now, is there things you found in Prophets and Kings that you felt were wrong?
I have learned to question some of these books that were written after her death or that were compiled after her death to verify what's going on.
Okay.
And that's why
go on.
That's why I used it as one of 3 examples, because the other 2 books, when I read the source documents and the articles themselves, I find that the conclusions that were drawn were very different from the snippets that were used in those compilations.
Okay. Yeah, well, I definitely, the worst compilation is Counsels on Diets and Foods, because they're just sometimes one sentence,
right,
completely removed from any kind of context.
Just
now, go on.
Just like I've seen in Child Guidance and Adventist Home.
Yeah. So I appreciated Child Guidance and Adventist Home. as books. They definitely helped me as a young, you know, guy in his early 20s, starting a family. You know, I got baptized when I was 19. So yeah, it is definitely really helpful. But but have you found statements that really just are, wrong, or like they are her words, but it's just that they're out of context?
That is
Or,
correct.
yeah, because I have compared the articles that are in Prophets and Kings with the Review and Herald articles, and I found that mostly they're just, the editing is pretty minor, right? There's just sometimes they'll take some material from another place and pad it out a bit just because, to help make it flow between them. But I always thought Ellen White was alive when they published, or that she had something to do with its compilation. I'd have to look at that again. That was a long time ago. Like, I'm thinking back when I looked at this would have been in the 1990s. So, over 30 years ago. So it's been a long time since I looked at it, but I completely forgot about that. And that's why there's a footnote. Yeah. So there's because I had this discussion with Tanya Beeman, right, about the footnote in Prophets and Kings. Are you familiar with the footnotes, how they changed?
No, I'm not.
Yeah. So in Prophets and Kings, they have a footnote because she had this view that, because she always misreads Spirit of Prophecy, but she had this view that there's 220 years and 210 years. So she's going to divide the 430 years into 220 and 210 instead of two periods of 215. And in Prophets and Kings, there is, so maybe that's in Patriarchs and Prophets. Maybe that's why I'm getting confused. Yeah, I think that's what I'm doing. I'm getting confused. Anyway, there's a footnote in maybe it's in Patriarchs and Prophets. That's why. Because Ellen White she had been involved in the original of Patriarchs and Prophets, right? She was alive when that was published.
Definitely.
But then there's a footnote that later after her death that is added where it talks about the 430 years and the 215 and the 215 and the chiasm. And so Tanya Beeman didn't accept that because it was in the second edition. That must have been Patriarchs and Prophets, because that wouldn't be in Prophets and Kings.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's why I'm getting confused. Okay. Now that I know why I'm confused, I'm not as confused as I was. Okay. But you can see there's a lot of details that we need to address, and we always have to address these details. We can't just let something go by, especially if I say something wrong, because we need to establish, this chronology beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? We need to know that it's correct. So we have that about false Smyrtus, and she's going to clearly show that the temple is completed under the prophesying of Haggai and Zechariah. And you definitely can't put Haggai and Zechariah into 400 BC, right? You're not going to put them in the time after Artaxerxes' decree in 457. But you can see why Adventists do that. And I kind of have a feeling, like, because these were original books, people, part of it just comes from trying to defend Adventism against the critical scholarship. So in some ways you have to sort of commend them for, supporting what they understood from the way that they understood, the 2300 days and all that. And they would look at a lot of this more modern stuff as all destructive. So I understand it, but it's really hard even with the Bible to draw that conclusion that this Darius that's being talked about after they mention Artaxerxes and Ahasuerus and Artaxerxes, that Artaxerxes here with Bishlam and Mithridath and Tabeel is Artaxerxes the Great, right? Artaxerxes in 457. It just doesn't really make sense. But now we also have this other, the rest of the nations whom the great and noble, a snapper brought over and set in the cities of Samaria. So who is a snapper? You see here in verse 10. So I know we'll go over this stuff again, but so this is going to be in the time of right? So they're going to have this Artaxerxes. This is going to be false Smyrtus, right? Because Ahasuerus was Cambyses. And then it says, and the rest of then wrote Rehum the chancellor and Shimshai the scribe and the rest of their companions, the Dianites and the Apharsethites. That sounds almost like saccharin or something. And the Tarpelites and the Apharsites and the Archavites and the Babylonians and the Susankites and the Dehavites and the Elamites and the rest of the nations whom the great and noble Asnapper brought over and set in the cities of Samaria. So here we have mentioned Esarhaddon, right? And now they're going to have like a snapper. So who is a snapper? They say probably King Ashurbanipal, okay, or Osnapper, a horned bull, thorn abolished is what his name means. An Assyrian king who transported other peoples into Samaria. So what is the relationship of Ashurbanipal to Esarhaddon? When does he fit in the chronology?
If what I'm looking at is correct, he would have been the king of the Neo-Assyrian Empire from 669 to 631.
Okay, so he's going to be after Esarhaddon.
Yes, Esarhaddon would have been his father.
Yeah, okay. That's what I was thinking. But yeah, because from 677, so I have here 668 to 627. You had what?
669 to 631.
Okay, so yeah, so we got a difference there. But I think this is probably the correct one. Yeah, because you have from 681 to 668 or 669, you have Esarhaddon, right? So he's going to be the king at the time when Manasseh is taken captive. So he's also going to be bringing people into Samaria after Esarhaddon. But the people in the beginning, they're going to mention Esarhaddon, not a snapper, right? They're going to say, we were brought here since the days of Esarhaddon, but more had been brought at different times. Now, when it comes to how Miller fit this dealing with the 677, right? Remember, he's going to say that in 677 that, how does he do it? I'm trying to remember. So he's going to have, how does that go again? Because he's going to take the prophecy of Isaiah 7, dealing with the breaking of Ephraim, and he's going to mark that breaking of the pride of power with Ephraim. He's going to mark that in 677. Now, Ellen White, when she quotes Miller's chapter, she actually excises that from the quote. She doesn't take the 65 years for the breaking of Ephraim, right? Now, why do we not have the 65 years for the breaking of Ephraim? Why do we apply the 65 years to Manasseh's captivity, which he had as well, but he's going to have it as the breaking of Ephraim? And so why do we not accept his argument? Why does Ellen White not put it in the Great Controversy when she's quoting that paragraph? She quotes the paragraph word for word from page 74 of Miller's memoirs, but she takes that part out, the breaking of the pride of Ephraim or something like that. Yeah, I should find that statement. So why is this important? Why am I bringing it up?
Doesn't it help us to basically fix the time periods chronologically where they should be?
Okay, so it helps us with the 2520. Like if we're going to recognize that the breaking of the pride of Ephraim, that Miller gets that wrong, right? So she's going to quote Bliss's book. So this is Sylvester Bliss wrote the memoirs of William Miller, right? Another kind of evidence that vitally affected my mind, he says, was the chronology of the scriptures. I found that predicted events which had been fulfilled in the past often occurred within a given time. So she's quoting Miller. The 120 years of the flood, 7 days that were to precede it with 40 days of predicted rain, the 400 years of the sojourn of Abraham's seed, 3 days of the butler's and baker's dreams, the 7 years of Pharaoh's, the 40 years in the wilderness, the 3.5 years of famine. And then she has the ellipses, and then the 70 years captivity. What she left out of this quote, right? She's going to continue more chronological periods, quoting that. But she's going to leave out the part. So I'm going to read it here from Bliss's book, and Miller, right? So in the book itself, yeah, so he has 65 years to the breaking of Ephraim is how he words it. So she takes that out, Isaiah 7 verse 8. Now, so the question is, why does she leave it out? Now, you could argue, if you were against the 2520, that she's leaving it out because she's opposed to the 2520. You could argue that, right? You'd say, oh, that deals with the 2520, and so she left it out. But can we see that Miller was wrong about the 65 years to the breaking of Ephraim? Because there isn't 65 years to the breaking of Ephraim. So, right, Ephraim is broken when? It's going to be 19 years to the breaking of Ephraim. And then what's going to happen to Ephraim is going to happen to Judah, which is when the land is forsaken of both her kings. It has to do with the kingship. So he misapplies it. Now, by Ellen White taking that out, what is she telling us? What can we discern from that? Because, she's not a sloppy writer. Right. So here is the quote there. So you can see that's the part she leaves out. Oops. How did I lose that? Yeah, the 65 years to the breaking of Ephraim. So that's what she leaves out. She just has 3 dots there in her, right? And she quotes these paragraphs in the opposite order. She starts with this paragraph, right? And then I think, maybe she does do it in this order. Yeah, she does it in this order. So she does this first. Yeah, another kind of evidence. She does it in the same order, but she leaves out the 65 years. So what does that tell us about Ellen White's perception? And if she's leaving it out on purpose, does that draw our attention to it? If she had left it in, what would that tell us? Right? Because she's going to intentionally not put it there. Any thoughts? Because it does tell us something, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's showing us something worthy of investigation. Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's extremely interesting because she could easily just quote it. Now, we know when she takes the next paragraph, she just paraphrases. She'll say, when therefore he found that various chronological periods all extended in his estimation to the second coming of Christ, right? She's going to go on and do that. So the various chronological periods, she's not going to quote as well. She's just going to say the 2300 days, the 7 times continuous, and the 1335, which are the ones, right? So she's just going to say this. She's just going to say, when he therefore found various chronological periods, which we know are these 3 periods, all evidently extending to the advent or the second advent of Christ, with other prophetical periods, he could but regard them as the times before appointed. Now, it would have been really nice if she had quoted this whole paragraph just as it is. But I believe that that's part of why the 2520 is hidden, right? That Ellen White intentionally knows what she's doing, right? Because she could just have quoted this and it would have been fine, because that's what he believed, right? But she's intentionally leaving it out. She's hiding it. The same with taking those, by eliminating the 65 years of the breaking of Ephraim. You have 2 options. Either she's hiding it or she doesn't believe it, right? So she thinks it's error. But she lots of times quotes people when it doesn't necessarily represent her view, right? There are things about what she will be quoting that anybody would know. It's just the opinion of the writer. But the fact that she hides this, I think, is extremely significant. Okay, so yeah, we're going to have to address a bunch of these details this week. We'll see how we get done. So any final thoughts before we close with prayer? None? Okay, well, let's pray. Dear Father in heaven, we are grateful, Lord, that we could have this time this morning, and we are thankful for the correction that you give us. We also ask, Lord, that you can help us to spend time in personal study and contemplation and prayer. We know, Lord, that we can be wrong about things, and we need you to correct us. Help us, Lord, to receive what it is you want us to see, to learn the lessons you want us to learn, and to trust fully in you. We pray again for your blessing upon each person, that your healing hand can be upon those who are struggling in various ways. We also pray for our family and friends, that you can work in their lives, that we can be an influence. Thank you for hearing our prayer. In Jesus' name we pray.